Growing up in San Francisco, I always saw my beloved city as a beacon of tolerance and civility. That's why it was particularly distressing when several years ago, the growing incivility in our society began to seep more and more into the Jewish community. Suddenly, JCRC was being inundated by institutions contacting us and describing the kind of polarization and growing vitriol that they were experiencing. It reached a head with the Jewish Film Festival incident several years ago, but even beyond that, we had seen this growing incivility that had to be addressed. JCRC, with its history of being an exemplar of civil discourse in the community, was well positioned to organize a campaign which we called a Year of Civil Discourse, to ensure that our community moved from a community of distress to a community of civility again.
JCRC knew that we needed to do something. Things had reached a feverish pitch in terms of incivility in the community, and it was personally painful to observe this unfolding in the community. So we engaged Rachel Aaron Kalish, who has been a tremendous asset in really changing the dynamic in the community. We have been able to have a viral impact, first reaching out to institution leaders and to rabbis, community professionals, and we're really thrilled that we've been able to impact directly over 1,000 people. What it has meant is that we've been able to amplify the voices that were previously drowned out by the voices of incivility and vitriol. And it's been exciting to see the ripple effect that this has now had nationwide. We know we're not done in creating a community of civil discourse, but we've made incredible strides.
We have a tradition that actually is infused with teachings about how to treat each other and how to show respect, how to engage with differences. And sometimes we haven't lived that because we're too triggered, too upset, and our survival mechanism has been affected. So a lot of us move into fight, flight, or freeze quite easily. I call it, if you don't see it my way, we might all die syndrome.
We used to have an extraordinarily adversarial environment at Congregation Bethel regarding Israel. The hostilities reached a head with a program that we had for a group of refuseniks, soldiers who refused to serve in the territories in Israel. At the end of that program, congregants actually stood around for an hour or two afterwards and screamed at each other. The hostilities were so bad that we just decided we would take Israel off the table, and we simply called off all Israel programming. So for years, we had no Israel programming.
Right when I stepped up to be president of my congregation was when the Gaza flotilla incident happened, and my congregation exploded over it. People couldn't talk to each other. There was anger. There was tension. It got really horrible.
It just hurt me so much. It just tore me up inside to hear and see people who I love at each other's throats.
So the climate in the community, based on what was going on in Israel and what was happening here, was exceedingly overheated. And we knew we needed to do something very quickly. And we created a process where 6 institutions could go through a year-long training and dialogue process, tailor-made to each institution. And then we trained 100 Jewish leaders in the community, managers and executive directors, in how to have challenging conversations within their institutions.
The result of that is we got together to take part in this program. And Rachel Aaron Kalish came in and brought us together and taught us the ground rules of how you have this kind of a conversation. And it was extraordinarily effective.
And it was an enormous growth process for us. We learned how to contain our emotions, how to recognize our emotions, and how to respect one another and listen to one another.
What it reminds me of is the story from the Talmud about the arguments between Rabbi Hillel and Rabbi Shammai.
Shammai and Hillel liked studying, but they disagreed about everything. Hillel said, hot. Shammai said, cold. Hillel said, young.
They're arguing back and forth, and then a voice from heaven comes out and says, these and these are the words of the living God, meaning you're both right. But then it continues, and it says, but the halakha, the law, follows Hillel. And why does the law follow Hillel? Because Hillel listens to the other side first, and then decides with compassion and care. And so that's what we were learning to do in this program.
Because we created so much safety and a sense of spaciousness, people were able to really share feelings, and there was a sense of what Martin Buber describes as an I-thou relationship, where there's something in the between that feels like it's sacred that you just don't get in normal conversation.
The year-long process created such a safe space that people were able to share openly and honestly what was in their kishkas.
What we discovered through the process was that there had been people who didn't feel they had a voice in the congregation when it came to Israel. And as a result of this process, people spoke out and people educated and people started speaking about what they felt and thought. And as a rabbi, I couldn't ask for anything more.
The program had a really deep effect on me and was really meaningful and changed me and changed the way I had conversations about Israel almost right away.
One episode that reflects the usefulness of the civil discourse paradigm was an event that I recently did, which was a dialogue event with Gordon Gladstone, who's the Western States Director of J Street. The organizers made it very clear that they would like this event to be held within the guidelines of civil discourse, and it was very easy for both of us to agree to it. And I think this really enhanced the event. It allowed a reasonably large audience to attend, knowing that they were going to see an event that was really going to shed more light than heat on the issues on which we did disagree.
We're now able to have Israel programming. So we have all kinds of Israel programming going on, some for entertainment, but some also that's political. And what I find now is that rather than judging every program, people are simply enjoying them.
In Judaism, as we all know, there is a high value placed upon debate and argument. And we need sometimes to be reminded of how to do it well, so that we lead ourselves towards positive outcomes and affirm that value.
Working at Berkeley Hillel, what I find is that in every aspect, the campus is a microcosm of the Jewish community. And when the Jewish community acts in amazing, healthy, and civil ways, it allows me to tell the students to model that. But when the community is not acting civilly, what ends up happening is the students tend to model that behavior, and it creates a dysfunctional and impossible way to create community on campus.
I think there's just this feeling in the community like civil discourse has value. And before, I think we were focused on maybe our way is the right way. How can we argue the other person down? How can we convince them that we're right? Who has the most facts that they can pull out in support of their argument? And now I think there is a sense in the community like, actually, what has value is the community and that we can talk to each other.
We've moved from a community that debated issues to a community that now dialogues issues. And that's huge.
I think every synagogue president needs to bring their congregation through the year of civil discourse, because even when the topic isn't Israel, even when it's something else, people now have the skills to talk about it and get along and build community rather than tearing their community apart. And it's a great thing for a synagogue president to have.